What happens when a late-night interview goes from friendly banter to absolute chaos in a matter of minutes? Tonight, we're breaking down the moment Lily Allen walked on the Jimmy Fallon stage and everything fell apart. This wasn't your typical celebrity interview. What started as casual conversation turned into one of the most uncomfortable exchanges in late-night television history, and it all happened live in front of a studio audience. Before we get into exactly what was said to cause security to get involved, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me who you think was in the wrong here. Trust me, you're going to have opinions. So, Lily Allen walks out, and the energy is already a bit off. Jimmy's doing his usual thing, big smile, enthusiastic welcome, but if you watch closely, you can see Lily's body language is stiff. She sits down, crosses her legs, and there's this moment where Jimmy leans forward with that classic talk show host excitement and says, "So, Lily, you're back in New York. You're performing again. Tell us what you've been up to." Pretty standard opening, right? But Lily just looks at him for a second too long before answering. She goes, "Well, Jimmy, I've been writing," which you'd know if you actually listened to any of my recent work. The audience does that nervous laugh thing where they're not sure if it's a joke or not. Jimmy laughs too, but you can see his eyes do this quick scan, like he's trying to figure out if she's serious. He recovers pretty fast, though. That's his job. And he says, "Of course I listen. I'm a huge fan. I was actually just telling the producers backstage how much I love your new stuff." And Lily just tilts her head slightly and goes, "Really? Which song's your favorite then?" Now, Jimmy's in a position. He clearly hasn't listened, or if he has, he can't remember specifics in the moment, and you can see him trying to think fast. He does this thing where he laughs and gestures vaguely and says, "Oh, there are so many. I don't want to pick favorites. They're all great." Classic deflection. But Lily doesn't let it go. She leans back in her chair and says, "No, go on. Name one. Just one song from my last album." The audience is dead silent now. This isn't playful anymore. Jimmy tries to laugh it off, does his desk slap thing, says, "Come on, you're putting me on the spot here." But Lily cuts him off. She says, "I'm putting you on the spot? You invited me on your show. You're supposed to interview me about my music, and you haven't listened to a single track, have you?" The way she says it isn't even angry. It's just matter of fact, which somehow makes it worse. Jimmy's smile is still there, but it's frozen now, and he tries to redirect. He says, okay, you got me. I've been so busy with the show, but that's why you're here, to tell me about it, to tell everyone about it." Lily doesn't move. She just stares at him and says, "That's the problem, though, isn't it? We come on these shows, we promote our work, and you lot just want us to play along with your scripted jokes and fake enthusiasm. You don't actually care about what we're doing. You care about ratings." Jimmy's face changes. Then the host's smile drops for just a second, and he says, "That's not fair. We have hundreds of guests. I can't possibly." And Lily interrupts him. She says, "Then maybe don't book people whose work you have no interest in. It's disrespectful." The audience doesn't know what to do. Some people are clapping, but it's scattered and confused. Jimmy looks at his desk, looks at his notes, and you can tell he's trying to figure out how to save this. He takes a breath and says, "Look, I apologize if you feel disrespected. That wasn't my intention. Why don't we start over, and you can tell us about the album?" Lily shakes her head. She says, "I don't want to start over. I want to have a real conversation, not this manufactured nonsense where you pretend to care for 8 minutes and then I leave." Jimmy's getting frustrated now. You can hear it in his voice when he says, "I do care. I invited you here. I'm giving you a platform." And Lily laughs, but it's not a nice laugh. She says, "A platform? You're giving me a platform? Jimmy, I've sold millions of records. I don't need your platform. I thought this was going to be an actual interview, not whatever this is." She gestures around vaguely at the set, the cameras, everything. Jimmy sits back in his chair, and there's this moment where neither of them says anything. The band isn't playing, the audience isn't laughing. It's just awkward silence on live television. Then Jimmy leans forward and says, "With all due respect, I think maybe you're having a bad day and taking it out on me." That's when Lily's expression really changes. She uncrosses her legs, sits forward, and says, "Excuse me?" Jimmy doubles down. He says, "I'm just saying I've interviewed thousands of people, and the energy you're bringing right now, it's not normal. Maybe there's something else going on." Lily's eyes narrow, and she says, "So now you're psychoanalyzing me on your show. in front of all these people. Jimmy throws his hands up and says, "I'm trying to figure out why you came on my show just to attack me." The audience is fully uncomfortable now. You can hear people shifting in their seats. Lily stands up, which nobody expected, and says, "I didn't come here to attack you. I came here hoping for a real conversation, and instead I got exactly what I expected, which is nothing." She starts to unhook her microphone, and Jimmy stands up too, says, "Lily, come on, sit down, let's talk about this." But she's already walking. That's when things escalate beyond just an uncomfortable interview. Jimmy calls out, "Lily, please, just sit down for a second." And there's this desperation in his voice because he knows this is spiraling. But Lily stops walking, turns around, and here's where it gets really intense. She walks back to the chair, but she doesn't sit. She stands there with the microphone still in her hand, even though it's disconnected. And she says, "You want me to sit down? Fine, let's actually talk then. Let's talk about how this industry works." Jimmy looks relieved for a second, thinking he can salvage this, and he says, "Okay, great, yes, let's do that." Lily points at the audience and says, "These people paid money to be here tonight. They took time out of their lives to come sit in this studio. And what do they get? They get scripted bits, fake laughs, and hosts who don't care about their guests beyond what ratings they bring." Jimmy's face goes red, and he says, "That is not fair, and you know it. I care about every single person who sits in that chair." Lily shoots back immediately. "Then why didn't you prepare? Why didn't you take 10 minutes to listen to even one song?" Jimmy says, "I told you, I've been busy. We do a show every single night." And Lily just shakes her head and says, "So have I. I perform every single night, I write, I record, I promote, and somehow I still manage to do my homework when someone asks me to show up somewhere. It's called professionalism." The audience is starting to react now, and it's mixed. Some people are clapping for Lily, others are booing, some are just sitting there in shock. Jimmy hears the boos, and it seems to give him confidence. He says, "You know what? Maybe I didn't listen to every track on your album, but I don't think that gives you the right to come on my show and insult me in front of my audience." Lily laughs again, that harsh laugh, and says, "Your audience? They're not your audience, Jimmy. They're just people. They don't belong to you, and neither do I. I'm not some prop you can use for content." Jimmy loses his composure now. He says, "I have never used anyone. Every guest who comes on this show is treated with respect." The audience seems split. Half of them are nodding along with Jimmy, half with Lily. She says, "Respect? You call not even knowing my work respectful? You call cutting me off mid-sentence respectful? You call trying to gaslight me into thinking I'm having a bad day instead of admitting you messed up respectful?" That word gaslight seems to really hit Jimmy. He says, "I did not gaslight you. I was trying to understand where this hostility was coming from." Lily says, "It's not hostility, it's honesty, and you can't handle it because you're so used to people playing along with your little show." Jimmy's voice goes up another level. He says, "My little show? This little show employs hundreds of people. This little show has been on the air for years. This little show has given countless artists exposure they wouldn't have gotten otherwise." Lily doesn't back down. She says, "And every single one of those artists had to smile and nod and pretend like it was such an honor to be here, even when you clearly didn't care about their work. I'm just the first one honest enough to say it out loud." Jimmy points at her and says, "You're not honest. You're rude. There's a difference between honesty and cruelty, and right now you're being cruel." The audience gasps at that. Lily's mouth opens slightly, like she's genuinely surprised he said that. She takes a breath and says, "I'm being cruel? For expecting you to do your job, for expecting the bare minimum." Jimmy says, "The bare minimum? I invited you on one of the biggest talk shows in the country. I gave you a segment. I was prepared to talk about your album, your tour, whatever you wanted. But instead, you came out here with an agenda." Lily shakes her head vigorously and says, "I didn't have an agenda. I had expectations, and you failed to meet them." Jimmy runs his hand through his hair, clearly stressed, and says, "You know what? I think we need to end this interview." Lily says, "There was no interview. That's the whole point. You asked me one question, and then we started arguing because you couldn't answer a simple question about my music." Jimmy says, "Because you were testing me. You were trying to make me look bad from the start." Lily's voice gets louder.
She says, "I was giving you a chance to prove me wrong. I wanted you to surprise me, but you couldn't even do that." The producers are definitely trying to get Jimmy's attention now. You can see people in the wings waving, pointing at their watches. Jimmy sees them and says, "We need to go to commercial." Lily says, "Of course you do. Run away from the conversation. That's what you people do." Jimmy snaps back. "What do you mean, you people?" Lily says, "Television hosts, people who build careers on being fake." Jimmy's face is completely red now, and he says, "I am not fake. I'm genuine with every single person I meet." Lily looks at him for a long moment and then says something that clearly cuts deep. She says, "If you're so genuine, why does every interview feel exactly the same? Why does every guest get the same treatment, the same fake enthusiasm, the same scripted questions? You're not